Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Expeditors Podcast, where you can hear about front-of-mind topics in the logistics and freight forwarding industry through the lens of a global logistics provider. I'm your host, Chris Parker, and today's topic, the global air capacity shortage. Last time, it was about not enough semi-conductor chips to move around the world, and for this episode, we'll be covering the fact that there's not enough space to move those chips, or to meet the increasing demand for air transportation as ocean continues to see delays and capacity shortages. There's a lot of empty shelves and rising prices out there, so today I've got our Senior Vice President of Global Air, Kelly Blacker, to talk about what has been going on. Kelly, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Chris. It's nice to be here.
Yeah, absolutely, and happy to have you. I want to get to know you a little bit more, and for other folks here to learn more about you as well. What's your background? Who are you, and what has been your journey at Expeditors?
So I have been with Expeditors actually for 27 years, a variety of positions. Going all the way back to receptionist when I first started back in 1994. And I've spent most of my time in the field throughout the U.S. I've lived in New York and Columbus, Ohio, Memphis, and I spent the last 9 years actually in Atlanta. So being our district manager there and regional vice president before taking on this role in August of 2020. So took on the air freight market right in the midst of this chaotic time that we are still in. And I'm now based back in Seattle to help our air freight customers.
And for air, being Senior Vice President of Air, why do you care about air? What keeps you excited about what you do?
So it's funny. One of my very first jobs 20 plus years ago was in air, air export. I actually got to work in the warehouse and label the freight, move it out. It's probably one of the most fun memories. But air, it moves fast. It's always changing. It's moving quickly. You're making quick decisions. Customers are making quick decisions. So it's fun. I think it suits what I like to do in terms of being dynamic and fast.
Mm-hmm. Would you say then, without bias, that air is probably the coolest product then out there?
Absolutely. It's completely objective and non-biased opinion.
Sure. Well, let's talk about today now then. How are things in your neck of the logistics world? Like, what's your day-to-day been looking like lately?
Yeah, so day to day, I think, it's no secret we're still in the midst of the global pandemic and the impact to the air freight market. So as things sort of just shut down a year ago, we've been making our way back with capacity over time, but we're still short. So my day is largely spent doing things like this, actually talking to customers about the market, trying to stay up to date on the latest and greatest with what's happening in the air freight market. And that covers both capacity and what the airlines are doing to bring it back or take it down and what they can or cannot do, as well as with our customers. You mentioned the semi-conductor shortage. There is a large material shortage happening, and so productions are being delayed, and that's going to have a ripple effect for us to be ready for. So we spend a lot of time sort of understanding the supply chains of our customers and how that's impacting them. And then, of course, all of the other transportation services. Ocean is a large driver for air and what's going on in the ocean market. So staying up to date with that, understanding what's happening with ocean and the ripple that it's going to have on air, and then the ripple that both of those things have on the trucking industry, which is also struggling right now. So it's all one big circle, and it comes with really what starts it all is the demand, and we just are seeing unprecedented demand and the impact of that on the supply chain.
Yeah, absolutely. This capacity thing is a headache now. What was the big challenge for air before the pandemic happened?
Yeah, if we look back in time, there's been ups and downs, but I would say if you look at 2018, that was sort of the apex for air, was the largest time globally for air cargo movement. Mm-hmm. So whenever you have surges in air freight, you've got cost considerations. So I think with air, it's always sort of the supply and demand and the cost component of what that looks like. It's very expensive to move air. So customers are always pushing the price down as much as they can, but recognizing that there's still a cost to it. So 2019 was also a good year, but not as much. So as cycles go through traditional air freight products, such as, the pharmaceutical industry, the high-tech industry. And so it's sort of, well, what's coming out? What's needed? What's important? Do people need to air freight it, or can they stick with ocean? So there's a lot of volatility all of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, this year is just put us in a tailspin. In regards to capacity for air, it's also largely dependent on travelers.
Mm-hmm.
The passenger network carries about 50% of the cargo, and when that disappears, obviously there's a problem there. So until we really start to fly again, and that's international travel,
Right.
we're going to continue to see the capacity shortage.
All right. So you mentioned the reduced passenger flights impacting capacity. Where else did it all go? Like, where the heck did all the capacity go? I think that's what on a lot of people's minds right now, right?
It parked. It went away and parked in the desert. Is where it largely went. So the components of capacity, let's talk about the freighters first. Of course, those never went away. They've been there, and they have increased their capacity quite a bit over the last 18 months. There's been some additional freighter capacity, but not much. It's not that there was an influx of traditional freighters. Those freighters are now loading more. The load factors are higher. If you think of the contour of the plane and how to get the cargo in, it's higher now. Block hours flying more. So both of those things increase capacity. And so the freighters have taken on a lot of that. On the passenger side, the passenger aircrafts have put in cargo-only flights, passenger freighters, but they can only do that where they know for sure that cargo will ride. And that cargo has to make up for the loss of the passenger revenue. So it's something that people may not realize. Number one, like I said before, the passenger planes moved about 50% or more of the cargo globally. But also the passenger revenue makes up, depending on the airline, between 70 to 90% of the revenue. So with all of that gone, that cargo cost has to cover it. And if it doesn't, they'll take down the plane. They can't afford to fly because they're already, the financial impact to the airline industry has been tremendous. And there's not recovery yet. They're still in a financially bad situation. And so the planes got parked. So as demand has increased, flights have been put back in, but there's still a percentage that are parked and will remain parked, either because we're not traveling internationally or because it's time to retire those aircraft. It might be less efficient. It's time to evaluate. The airlines can evaluate their entire fleet and sort of look to the future. So the overall industry is going to be smaller for a few more years. I think there's data that shows the ordering of new aircraft got pushed out into the future, into 2023, 2024. So we're really looking at a constrained market for the next couple of years. The estimates are that we won't have the same level of pre-pandemic capacity until about 2024.
As you and I were kind of preparing for this interview, you mentioned something about this ecosystem of transportation. And I think of ocean impacting air. What does that relationship look like, and what is happening between those different modes?
So on the air freight side, in a normal market, you've got some traditional things that move mostly air, like I mentioned, the pharmaceutical, high-tech industry, maybe AOG type shipments. But the bulk of our consumer goods move ocean. So when you have the capacity situation that we have and the demand that we're seeing in ocean, the ocean market is in not having the containers in the right place, not being able to get loaded, not being able to get your containers, then all of those other industries shift over into air as well. Your general goods, whatever it might be, automotive, home goods, everything might shift over into air. So we see that conversion. The challenge is, a very small amount of ocean has a big impact on air in terms of total capacity. There's really no comparison. So we're seeing some of that now, but everything is so congested. There's also, I think, an element of just shifting the smallest amount companies can in terms of that cost. Another phenomenon that we're seeing is sort of the cost comparison between air and ocean is shrinking. So there's been some recent publication out that air typically is about 12 times higher than the cost of ocean, get it down to a component level. And now it's actually shrunk down to about 6 times, just due to the increase in the ocean cost and inability to get loaded. So that's another factor. Evaluating costs and trying to get things faster, you're going to see a surge in air as well.
Another thing that I'm thinking about here is time, right? Ocean is traditionally a slower mode of transportation, which lends itself to why it's a cheaper mode of transportation. And air is definitely those time-sensitive shipments, or it's just a faster mode, right? How does that affect the equipment needs and the trucking needs at the end when they're receiving into their destination? And what has the impact of that look like?
Yeah, that's actually a really great question, because one of the things that we are seeing due to the increase in the demand really on the Trans-Pacific, Asia into the U.S. is really what's getting hit the hardest. Although into Europe is also there as well, is the U.S. infrastructure. So we can see it on the ocean side. The ports are struggling mightily, but so are the airline hubs as the cargo comes in. So without the passengers, the cargo, the freighter companies, and the passenger flights that are moving just cargo, they're largely going to fly to the hub. They're eliminating some of those offline points that would be filled with passengers. So they're flying into the hubs, and some of the reasons for that is landing rights, of course, the ease of getting in and out, but also return cargo. You've got to get to a place where you can easily get the bulk of the return cargo. That's going to come from the hubs. And so the hubs are getting just inundated with cargo. So again, the word unprecedented gets overused these days, but I'm going to use it again.
Right.
And it's coming into those places and they're getting really overloaded. So we're seeing some significant congestion in the U.S. traditional gateway locations. Mm-hmm. So there's just too much cargo. So it starts with the airline ground handlers and trying to unload the aircraft and get that turned around and make it available for us. They can't handle it as well. They don't have the capacity, warehouse capacity to turn it quickly. Labor is also an issue. The equipment is also an issue in terms of forklifts and things like that to get the cargo moved. And then it compounds into the CFS operation, same issue, lack of warehouse capacity and labor, and just being able to do that throughput. And then you get into, okay, it's finally ready, now come get it. We're faced with a trucking challenge as well, making sure that we've got that trucking capacity to get it out of the facility. So it really is, each domino that falls makes the next step in the process more difficult. And right now, we're seeing the results of that on the destination side in being extremely congested.
Yeah, it absolutely is like this massive ecosystem where everything is interlocked and connected to each other. And one little thing, this has been a big thing, but it's also having like exponentially larger impact, as it goes on. What are some surprising ways that COVID caused this shortage or has impacted the infrastructure of air freight?
Yeah, well, I think, one of the things I just said in terms of airlines sort of shaving off the connecting locations. Mm-hmm. So airlines have really pared down shipping to the hub locations. Also, the emphasis on cargo. Again, the passenger carriers, the passengers have always made up the bulk of the focus, mm-hmm. because that's where the revenue comes from. So, sure. Of course, that's going to be the case. And the cost to move goods, and this is across the board, has always been pushed down. How can we get things moved at a less cost? So, mm-hmm. transportation costs being pushed down over the course of time. And if that cost goes down, then your ability to invest in infrastructure at the hubs at destination gets pushed down or delayed. And so what we're seeing now is sort of a resurgence of the focus on cargo. Cargo is saving the airline industry right now. And therefore it's getting more attention and more focus. And hopefully that will translate as we look into the future and more focus on cargo. Because what we've seen is airlines kind of scale back a little bit on cargo if you look at the last 10 years or so, and focus more on the passenger side and less on the cargo side. And, we're sort of having our moment now, and let's see if that translates to the future. To be determined, I think.
Yeah. And you saying that cargo is the focus now and passengers not so much. I've been hearing, call me crazy, but I've been hearing that cargo is now riding in the place of passengers. We now have cargo actually sitting in airline seats and that are flying out there. How are airlines trying to add capacity? Like, it sounds like they're clearly getting very creative.
Yeah, they have. Actually, you should Google it if any of us here haven't done that. It's kind of neat to see the cargo on the seats.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's exactly what they've done. So on heavy cargo routes, the airlines have been able to put in cargo-only flights. They're calling them freighters, passenger freighters. And there are some that have actually done a full conversion where you take the seats out and you just make it a freighter.
Yeah.
But less of that and more of using their existing flights to accommodate the market. So the good part is it adds some capacity back, but the negative or the output of that is it's a lot harder to load and unload. Right. You've got to individually strap in the cargo to the seat or the overhead bin, and so you don't have your big ULDs that can just be loaded on and off really quickly.
Yeah.
And so again, at the destination side, I talked about some of the congestion. Well, that adds to it. Now it takes longer to unload and get that stuff turned around, and that adds more time and more congestion.
And I imagine too, like the depalletization that you have to do in order to strap that freight in. And I'm thinking about like when I see a pallet get put together, they have to tear that apart and then put it back together at the destination. That's going to cause even more delay and stress and constraint, no?
Yeah, well, there's always cargo that moves loose. So not everything is been built up. There's always cargo that comes in loose. And you're seeing that because you're right. It has to be loose cargo to fit up there. Sure. And it has to be of a certain size and a certain weight. So it does limit some of what can be put up there. But there's always enough, especially these days, to keep as much as we can palletized on the lower deck part of the aircraft or on the freighters, and then put the loose cargo in the seats. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to mislead because it is happening. We're seeing a lot of passenger freighters, and some airlines have done a great job of adding that, but it hasn't been enough to overcome the loss of the capacity of the flights that are still parked.
Right. So what does our side as freight forwarders look like? What kind of position are we finding ourselves in between the needs of our customers and then the capacity or securing the capacity, that carriers can provide?
Yeah, that's really the biggest thing we're focused on right now. So, we work with the carriers on long-term strategic relationships. We try very hard to partner ourselves in a unique way. And from that side of it, during the pandemic, we kept that same philosophy or focus. So the commercial carriers, they're hurting. They're not doing as well. So we try to stay with them and partner with them and try to support them as best we can. Mm-hmm. So I guess on the carrier side, the main focus that we have is trying to secure capacity because there's just less of it.
Sure.
And then the customers need capacity. So all of the other conversations in regards to price and whatnot are less important now than making sure we have capacity. Mm-hmm. So I think the forwarder industry as a whole is in that position of trying to get as much as we can in the right time in the right place to service the business. The customer side, and talk about the struggles on either side. Customers are trying to get the goods in. People are ordering. Demand is not going down. Inventory to sales ratios are historic lows. PMI is still very high. There's all these indicators that show that demand is going to continue. And they're under a lot of pressure to get the goods in and try to get them back on the shelf. So trying to play to make sure that we're doing as best we can to support the carriers as well as get the capacity for our customers. But I think our our biggest role in that is obviously the facilitation of the movement, but helping the market understand the levers that are happening. Why are we in this situation due to the pandemic and the cost pressure that's been coming for a long time? We've pushed the price down so low for so long that it's got to rebalance itself. And then just the sheer demand. People have got some disposable income and they're spending it.
Yeah.
And there's no end in sight.
Let's hope there is at some point someday that there is.
Maybe you could strike that.
Yeah, hey, we're on this ride forever. So there are organizations like the International Air Transportation Association, IATA, keeping a close eye on the situation. You mentioned earlier that we were looking at to return to pre-pandemic levels of capacity by 2024. Now, I had read that was an estimate from at least a year ago. You're saying that that's still the same. Why hasn't that estimate changed, or could it change?
Yeah, I definitely think it could change, but I would say it hasn't changed yet. If you consider the ability to bring in new aircraft, that takes a long time anyway.
Sure.
In regards to, you're looking at a couple of years to bring in new capacity. And then in terms of the capacity that is still parked, that some of that will continue to return, but some of it will never return. Again, like I said before, that'll be retired, moved on, less efficient aircraft. So we're looking to the future. You've got both of those things combined in regards to total capacity. The other big piece is the travelers. There are parts of the world that were more heavily dependent on passenger aircraft. The Trans-Pacific is where a large amount of the freighters have always been. So that's going to rebound faster if you look at total capacity. But going into Europe, for example, a lot of leisure travel, a lot of business travel there. And so a lot more passenger flights going into there. So that needs that to return. Other markets like Latin America, the South Pacific, same type of thing. So parts of the world will recover more slowly until we start to travel again.
Gotcha. If we were to look back at this shortage and compare it to other capacity shortages that have happened in the past, will this be seen as a hiccup 20 years down the line, or will this have surpassed previous challenges and previous shortages? Now, I know that it's kind of different because this is a global pandemic that happened, but how do you think we'll look back on this?
Yeah, history will define us all. But if we look at two really big historical events, 9/11, that happened in the United States, but that did have global ramifications where all air travel stopped for a period of time, but it was a very short period of time.
Sure.
So in terms of the movement of goods, not as much of an impact as it did have on travelers. I think travelers were a lot more hesitant to return at that time. And then the financial crisis in 2008, 2009 was another big dip in the global scale of things. And, I think sometimes we don't recognize that actual recovery took a little while in regards to getting things back to pre-levels. But my estimate is that this is much, much greater than either of those two things. If we think about global supply chain and the fact that it's impacting everything. It's not just an economic thing that happened in the 2008 financial crisis. This is an economic thing. It's a consumer behavior change. It's how we order goods change. So there's a lot more going on, I think, this time, and that will have a longer ripple effect.
What would you say companies are doing strategically in order to kind of keep things moving? What has proven successful for various organizations?
Yeah, I think it's going to take a while to sort of sort through that. It hit us all really hard. So there's more of a reactionary thing happening. And it hit us hard in that the world just stopped. And then it hit us hard again when the world reopened and started really buying on a big scale. So both of those things we weren't necessarily ready for. So I think customers are right now just trying their best to get the goods where they need to go through any traditional means they can. But looking, I guess sort of a short-term fix is trying to pull orders up. We're about to hit the holidays again and trying to pull those orders sooner than they would normally ship as best they can. And then if we look to the long term, I think there will be discussions again about shifting production. We were having those conversations pre-pandemic, and I think we'll start to pick up again about where manufacturing takes place. Maybe it becomes closer to the distribution networks, and then bringing inventory in closer to where the goods ultimately need to be. I think that's probably one of the biggest things, because e-commerce, took off at a much faster pace than the world hadn't previously anticipated.
Sure.
We're ordering like crazy from an e-commerce standpoint. So I think getting those inventory levels closer to the distribution networks will likely be a long-term change.
All right. So last question to wrap this all up is, what helps you sleep at night? Like, what aren't you worried about right now?
I feel like whatever I say here, people will have a different opinion. So we'll try to say it the right way. But this is a global thing that occurred. Yeah. Every country, every person has been affected by this in varying degrees. So I would like to think that globally we can come out of it together, maybe a little bit more connected, understanding that when something happens in one country, it affects so many other things. Mm-hmm. And this was a really good reminder to all of us how interconnected the world is. So I'm not sure that helps me sleep at night, but I think it is maybe a positive that comes out of this. And then personally, you think about all of the damage that this has done to businesses and people and individual lives. And it's really sad to think about. On the other hand, the positives, we've all been given a moment to reflect, a moment to slow down. And for me, a moment to spend a lot more time with family and my kids and just being around more. And that's been a huge benefit. So that's definitely helped me sleep at night, to just be more connected to the people around me.
Yeah, what a gift to be told to stay where you are, and then you can start asking yourself, like, who am I? What do I care about? Like, what's important to me? A lot more
self-reflection than ever before.
Well, Kelly, thank you so much for chatting with me about this today. If people wanted to get into contact with you to talk more about this and learn more, where can they find you?
Yeah, I'm very available. We're not traveling so much yet, so still at home and local. So I'm absolutely available through Expeditors if you want to make the phone call or send an email. Mm-hmm. I am also on LinkedIn, Kelly Blacker, and on Instagram as well. Those are the only two social media platforms that I use, but I'm available and active on both of those.
Excellent. Well, Kelly, thank you again so much. And have a great day. Take care.
Thank you so much, Chris.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you've got questions or want to learn more about today's topic, check out the show notes for more information. And before you go, make sure you're subscribed on whatever podcast app you're using so you won't miss the next episode. To learn more about Expeditors, you can find us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, or simply visit us at expeditors.com. Take care, and I'll see you next time.